Welcome back to another Procreate tutorial. Today we are going to learn how to create our own digital Papercut Lightbox in Procreate. For this, I've switched to the light interface so that you can actually see the outline that we're going to create today. Let's go ahead and come to this plus icon to create a new canvas. We're going to just use a square for this, but you can use any size that you'd like. With all of my projects, I like to start out with a sketch. You can use any pencil for this. Built-in Procreate pencils are fine. For this, we're going to be creating a little bit of an ocean scene. I know I'm going to have several layers of a frame here. I'm doing this pretty rough, not going to worry about the texture at this time. And I'm just going to figure out where I'm going to place my ship here. I just want to have the basic layout here so I know where I'm going to put things later on. I think we're going to do this as a little bit of a ghost ship since it's spooky month right now. So I may even have some ghosts kind of floating around here later on. Just an idea. Let's rename this layer to Sketch and lower the opacity by touching this N right here. About 25 or 30% should be good. Come to the plus icon to add a new layer. And let's drop that underneath. Now, a traditional light box is actually just built with white paper. In order to get this look, we are going to use grayscale instead of colors like we did on a traditional paper cut. I've got a grayscale palette that I'm going to use, and this will help me get my layers to look like they're coming further and further from the light. They're getting more and more shadow cast on them. To create our ship, we are going to use a reference image. I'm going to open up Google Chrome here and just type in pirate ship. Come over to the image tab here and find one that I like the look of. I think this will work. And then we're going to come up here to these three tabs at the top to put us into split screen view. Choose Procreate as the other app. And then slide right here to make this a smaller window on this side. Now, in order to create my own version of this ship, I know this looks really complicated. I'm going to start by just creating some of the basic shapes and building this out. I'm going to use a basic monoline brush. You can find one of these in the calligraphy set within Procreate. I'm going to look at the main part of the ship here. I see this part is kind of a rectangle with some triangles built onto it. So let's start with a quick shape here. Tap on that and turn it into a rectangle. And let's add the back of the ship here. You can also trace something as well. I like when I'm using reference images not to trace them so I know that I'm not directly copying somebody else. But if you have a copyright-free image, then you can use that as well. I'm just trying to get the basic shapes in here first, and then we will refine this. I think this back edge needs to come out a little bit more. And then this would be rounded off. This is going to come down a little bit with some railings right here. I think that's looking pretty good. And then we're gonna have our masts. And some sails here. It's too big for the piece that I have. I'm going to come up to my transform tool and just reduce that down a little bit till it's closer to the size that I want. I'm temporarily going to turn this sketch off and reduce the opacity of this one so I can make a better final version of this on top. Let's add one more new layer here, and then we can refine this. And the thing about digital paper cuts is that they don't have to be as precise. If you were actually cutting this out with scissors, you might not be able to get as much detail as a regular drawing. If you were using something like a Cricut, then you could be a little more precise. So it's really just whatever look you are going for. I like to come in with the eraser and clean up some of these edges so they're more straight. They look like they were actually cut versus being quite so rounded everywhere. And I'm going to thicken this brush up a little bit and come in here and make these railings. Now we just need to add our masts and our sails. I'm going to do these on a new layer, so if I need to make any changes or erase them, I don't mess up the boat that I've already done. I'm going to come with a thicker brush for these. And then these taper a bit. I'm going to take the tip of these off here. I'm pushing and holding to get this straight line. Now we can combine those, because I think those look good, and we'll add the sails on another new layer. If we're going to go with kind of a ghost ship look, I'm going to make these sails a little bit more ragged than what we're seeing in the reference image. And give them sort of this look, and we can put some holes in them as well. Let's take our eraser, tap and hold to use the same brush, and reduce the size a little bit, and we can just erase some holes in these to make it look a little more ragged. Maybe even there's a tear in this one. Once you've got your ship how you like it, you can get rid of your reference image by pushing and holding on the middle and just dragging that away. I'm going to switch over to my eraser to cut out some eyes for these guys. Let's name our layers. Ship and ghosts. Now we're ready to draw our frame. For this frame, I'm imagining that we're looking at this ghost ship kind of through a portal with a bunch of different layers. Let's go ahead and add a few layers underneath this. For now, I'm going to go ahead and hide the ghosts and the ship by tapping these check marks here. And we want to have the darkest colors be the ones that are furthest away from the light. Those are in the most shadow. I'm going to come to my grayscale palette here and pick something from this bottom row, maybe about in the middle here. And I'm going to use a pretty thick brush. And I'm going to give this sort of an organic look here. Just letting my pencil slide around the edge like that. Then we're going to color drop on the outside, just like we do on our Papercut tutorials. On the next layer down, we're going to go a few shades of gray lighter. So I might come just to this last one in the third row here and do a similar thing, but slightly inside of this one. And it can cross over and under, however you'd like to make that look. And then we're going to color drop on the outside of that. And we'll repeat this process for however many layers you want your frame to have. For this project, I'm going to go ahead and stop at 5 because each of these is going to be in a group with multiple layers, and I don't want this video to be too long. But you can keep this going for as many layers as you want. This extra layer here, I'm going to drag to the bottom, and I'm going to fill this with the lightest gray in my palette here. That's going to be our background. Let's go ahead and bring back our ship and our ghosts. And these need to be lighter depending on how far back they are. I think they might be a little bit too big at this point. Let's swipe right on both of them and shrink them just a little bit using the transform tool. I'm going to tap on the ghosts and bring them up a couple of layers. We're going to turn alpha lock on both of these so we can recolor them. You can swipe right with 2 fingers, or you can tap on the layer itself and choose alpha lock. You should see this checkerboard pattern appear behind your artwork. We can either go ahead and get rid of or turn off our sketch at this point. The ship is going to be fairly light since it's mostly towards the back and getting a lot of light from our light box. I'm going to choose probably this third shade of gray here. With alpha lock turned on, we can tap on that layer and choose fill, and that will change that color. And then we can turn alpha lock back off. For the ghosts, they need to be in between these 2 colors. So what I'm going to do is actually sample this color and then move these grays up. Sample that with our finger, bring everything back, change the ghosts to this color by filling that layer. Let's sample this one. And we're going to change this color to that gray. Turn alpha lock on, fill, off, and then we can tap on this layer, come up to the adjustments menu here, go to hue, saturation, and brightness, and just brighten this up a little bit until we see some contrast there. Now we've got all the different layers that we need. Let's take our ship and the transform tool and move it down just a little bit so it looks like it's actually inside of this portal. And now we're going to make the 3D Lightbox effect. The first thing we're going to do is duplicate all of these layers and group them. Slide to the right, choose Group. This will help keep our layers panel nice and clean and organized. Now, the bottom one in each of these groups, we need to turn white. You can either turn on alpha lock and fill it with white like we just did with those other colors, or you can come to hue, saturation, and brightness and just turn the brightness all the way up. Now we're going to take all of these white copies and we're going to move them up a little bit. This will be creating the edge of our paper. Tap on the top one and swipe to the right on all of the others to multi-select them. Come to your transform tool. Zoom out a little bit if you need to by pinching. Just tap a couple times above your canvas until you start to see the edge of this paper showing up. And you can decide how thick you want that to be. I did that about 3 or 4 times. Now we're going to start to add our glow effects. We need to duplicate each of these white layers one more time. For the bottom one, after we duplicate it, we're going to change the blend mode by tapping on this N and changing it to Add. Now we're going to add a Gaussian blur to these to get our glow. Generally, you're going to see more glow for the ones that are closer to the light at the back. Let's start here. Come to Adjustments, Gaussian blur, and slide across the screen until you start seeing the glow. And we're just going to repeat these for all of the bottom white layers. In a real light box, the paper that's closer to the light is more illuminated. So we're going to reduce the opacity of some of these layers a bit as they get further away from the light. For the ship, we're going to leave that one just as it is. And we're going to start with this second layer here. And we're going to be working on the middle layer in each group, the one that has the normal blend mode, not the glow. We're going to tap on this N and reduce the opacity by 5 or 10%, depending on how many layers you have. Our next step is to add a little bit of a dark gradient to the top and the bottom of our light box. It just gives it a little bit more of a realistic look. This is going to go in your top group between these two white layers. So tap on your bottom one and add a layer above that. Come to your colors panel and choose solid black. We're actually going to use the selection tool for this. Change it to the rectangle mode and draw a small rectangle at the top here and just drop your black onto that. Tap it again to unselect it. Come back in there and do the same thing at the bottom. Now we're going to come to our adjustments and use the Gaussian blur on this to create a really nice gradient. About 50 or 60%. And if it's a little too strong, we can take the opacity down a bit too. Our last step before we actually add our paper texture to this is to put some color behind our light box. You can use a solid color or even a gradient. Let's start with just a solid color. Add one more layer above your dark gradient here. We're going to change the blend mode here by tapping on this N and go all the way down to the bottom to this one that says color. Just color with nothing else. You don't want it to say lighter color, color dodge, darker color, anything else. You want to just say color. Then choose the color of your light. Maybe we want it to be a warm yellow light, and you're just going to drop it on there. Now you've got a yellow light box. If it's too bright, you can always change that to a little bit of a softer tone. You can also add a gradient to this. Add a new layer above this one. Turn that color off. Change this blend mode once again to color. You can paint it on or use the selection method like we did before. Choose whatever part of this you want. Maybe this is going to be kind of a spooky blue. And then on the bottom, it's going to be more in the green tones. Now we can come back to our Gaussian blur and smooth out that gradient. Our last step is to add a paper texture, and there's two different options for this. Add a new layer at the top, and you can add a paper texture to your entire piece at the same time. You can either use a paper texture brush, or you can actually insert a file and use it that way. Make sure you're covering your entire canvas, and then you're going to change your blend mode. Overlay usually works pretty well for these. And then you can see your paper texture has been added. And it does look a bit more realistic if you add paper texture separately to each individual layer, as I've done here. And then you can change the direction of them and which texture is on which layer. So that is another option as well. In order to do that, you just need to use clipping masks. So come into your group, you would add the new layer above that, tap on it, and choose clipping mask. And then it would only be applied to that layer. It's a bit hard to see on the really dark one, so let's bring this down to one of the other layers. I'll use one of the paper brushes that I have here. I'll put a link in the description to the kit that I purchased for these paper brushes because they're really good. Now you can see we've got this texture just on the ghosts. Once you're happy with your piece, if you want to share it, you can export it by coming to the wrench and going to share and saving it as either a JPEG or a PNG. I hope you found that helpful. I love showing people how to combine creativity and technology on this channel. If you enjoyed it, I would really appreciate it if you took just a quick second to give me a thumbs up down below. It really does help out my small channel and just tells YouTube that more people should watch this. If you want to learn some more Procreate tips and tricks, make sure you watch this video next.